Hello and welcome to my how-to resin guide, I suppose you'd call it, for the Space Marine Astraeus Super Heavy Tank, the Astraeus. It will look like that eventually. I am in my bathroom, please don't judge me. So what I'm going to do is just show you the steps I take to prepare the resin, a resin model. I'm not talking about fine cast or normal plastic or anything like that. I am just talking about the Forge World resin. So you may get a box similar to this, and inside it you may get resin. Now you may get a smaller item like a character, you know, like a bounty hunter or just a Legion Space Marine. But these steps are the same for those two. So what you're going to do is, when you get your box or clam pack of resin pieces, such as this one, firstly what I like to do is just check around the whole of the piece. Make sure you've got all the pieces first of all, and make sure there aren't any glaringly obvious imperfections, bubbles, warping, slippage. Once you're satisfied that all the pieces are up to your standards, because you're the customer, you've spent hundreds, maybe even £1,000 on a model, it's up to you at the end of the day. It's not up to anybody else. If you don't feel comfortable that the pieces live up to your high standards or the standards you expect, then take some pictures, email it to Forge World straight away. They'll send you replacement parts. No questions asked. The customer service is excellent. It's one of the positives you can take away from having some pieces that have issues, and you should look at the positives. But anyway, I'm rambling on already. So you take your pieces, and you can use an old sort of Tupperware. Here's one I sort of grabbed earlier. Or if you've had children, you might not have had children, but an old baby bath. That works great for the bigger pieces, bigger models. Some people use their bath or bath. You can do that, but it does have a plug hole, and the Forge World aren't going to send you parts if your parts go down the drain. So if you are going to do that in the bath, just take some serious precautions. That's why I prefer letting them soak in containers rather than a sink or, you know, a bathtub. But there you go. So what I'll do is I'll take the part, I'll put it in Tupperware, whatever. Usually I'll sort of half fill it with pieces, and I prefer to keep it separate between like larger pieces and smaller pieces. So I mean, you could get away with those 3 pieces in there, but what I'm also going to do is just go one step further and put all these pieces in too. Up to you though, whatever you feel comfortable with. What I will say is the more pieces you do put in, obviously, you know, the more of that releasing agent is going to come off them, and you might have to fill your container up a couple of times. So then, once you've got all the greasy parts in the box, you grab some washing up liquid, doesn't have to be fairy, and you just generously, you know, squirt that on like caramel on a sundae or whatever. Now you've got a generous helping of that, go fill it up with warm water. Don't get any water from the kettle. Don't get cold water, just nice and warm water. And I'll show you that now. Okay, so now that you've got your warm water in there with your washing up liquid, then you're ready to leave this to soak. Now, typically I will leave it overnight because I end up doing these things at night after work and stuff. So you can come back to it in the morning, and I'll show you sort of the next step. The least I'd probably leave it in there is about 3 hours though. 2 hours, I just don't think that's enough time. But 3 hours, you'd possibly be okay. So what I'll do is I'll leave that in soak overnight in my case, and then I'll come back to it in the morning and I'll show you the next step. So join me then. Okay then, now that that is finished and they've been in soak in the water, all evening or for a few hours. The next step is, what I do is I just take all of that soapy water out and just fill it with sort of plain water and leave that to soak in for another couple of hours or so. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I just think that you're getting rid of like the concentrated sort of soap and the releasing agent, and then just giving it some fresh water. So once that's done and you're happy with the pieces, the best thing to do is run it under cold water and with an old toothbrush, obviously one that you're not using, then run it under the tap and just brush off every nook and cranny you can. If you're not happy with the pieces at this point, just refresh it. So put a load of more washing up liquid in, warm water, leave it for another couple of hours. You can sometimes tell because the releasing agent, sometimes it is quite thick, and you can actually peel it off with your fingernail. I've only had that happen a couple of times in all the hundreds of kits I've made. This process has worked every time for me, getting the releasing agent off. So what I'll do is I'll go away, rinse them all off, and then show you the final step. So once you've soaked all the parts and then rinse them and brush them using your old toothbrush, the next stage is just drying. This is the final stage before all your pieces are complete. I just throw them all on a towel and just let them dry, let the air get to them. Just be careful at this stage that you obviously don't lose any parts. This Astraeus does have fair number of parts, so you might want to do this in batches. Just concentrate on the larger parts first, or the smaller parts, whichever you wish to, and just let them dry. And after a couple of hours, if you get impatient, then you can just, what I do is I'll just sort of bang them on the towel a little bit, and that gets the water off. And if you rub them in the towel, that will dry them too. It's surprising, you transport these through to your hobby room and you start picking them up and clipping them off the sprues and things, they do dry out pretty quick. So it's not like you have to wait until all this is completely dry before moving it anywhere. You can do it while there's a little bit of water on the pieces. Doesn't make much difference, but just obviously when you're gluing, make sure that the parts are bone dry. That's my only advice there, really. That is the final stage, which is just the drying. Like I say, after the parts are dried, it's just the case of preparing all the parts. And that's it for my video on how to prepare Forge World resin. Hope you found it useful. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor protects.